joining us at the Seawolves Roundtable. Tonight we speak to an organization that is truly at the forefront of clinical nursing research in this country. Located in Bethesda, Maryland, the National Institutes of Health Clinical Center is a 200-bed hospital devoted entirely to biomedical research. Beyond the hospital room and lab, the organization researches issues affecting our communities as well, including their mental health. Tonight we speak to a group of clinical research nurses about their award-winning research that explored the relationship of adverse childhood experiences to PTSD, depression, and suicide in Native American youth. Today, to talk to us a little bit about the NIH Clinical Nursing Research Center is Representative Deb Allen. Hi, Deb.
Well, hello.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So could you give us a little bit of an overview of the NIH Clinical Nursing Center and maybe talk a little bit about what prompted this research to be conducted?
Absolutely. So the National Institute of Health Clinical Nursing, it's America's research hospital. It falls under the umbrella of the United States Department of Health and Human Services. It is one of the largest research centers in the world dedicated to supporting clinical research. Research is conducted by the individual institutes within the NIH as well as by our own clinical center staff. Now, the NIH research began back in 1887 in a one-room laboratory when they were researching cholera and other infectious diseases. Through the years, over 20 institutes have been established to study such health issues as cancer, eye disorders, genome research, alcohol abuse, nursing research, mental health disorders, child health, and human development and environmental health. Which leads us to the research that we're here to talk about tonight, which was conducted by the National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities. In 2010, a tribal leadership declared a state of emergency when a clustering of 6 suicides and 20 suicide attempts occurred over a 5-month period on their reservation. Native American adolescents and young adults are severely affected still today by historical events of their past, which has led to households wrought with poverty, substance, and domestic abuse. These issues, combined with outward discrimination in our outer communities, has created devastating, challenges and struggles.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I look forward to hearing about the research. All right, up next, we are talking to Katie Griffin and Catherine Nichols, 2 clinical nurse researchers, about their research and the results of their study. Katie, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us. Before we talk about our research and the results of our research, I just wanted to show you a video that I think is important. It was published by the Washington Post in November of 2014, and it was part of a story that they did called From Broken Homes to a Broken System. And the story was more specifically focusing on incarcerated Native American teens, but it really depicts firsthand accounts of all of the challenges that this population is facing. So I think it's an important thing to see, and it'll give you some insight as to why we conducted the research in the first place.
Okay, great.
I met some people like going through research stuff than me. Kids go through hard times. You just see our natives standing up there. You see alcohol everywhere, and that's sad.
Pine Ridge in South Dakota is the second biggest reservation in the United States. Larger than Delaware and Rhode Island combined, covering more than 2.7 million acres of grasslands where buffalo still graze. But the Oglala Lakota people living here are racked by 87% unemployment, and many live in crippling poverty. Pine Ridge and neighboring Rosebud reservations are located in 2 of the poorest counties in America. Alcoholism, drug addiction, domestic violence, and sexual abuse are all issues that the tribe faces. Indian children are twice as likely as any other ethnicity to die before the age of 24, according to the Indian Law and Order Commission. And often on these remote reservations, mental health services are hard to come by, leaving young people like Shauna Thornton on her own.
I went through depression from what happened with me and my father. Whenever he would get drunk, I would just decide to just leave the house and don't come back till he sobers up.
Just 20 minutes from Thornton's high school is the historic Wounded Knee Monument. At this site in December of 1890, the U.S. cavalry massacred an estimated 300 men, women, and children of the Great Sioux Nation. That painful day is still remembered by the Lakota people, as are the promises made by the U.S. government that have not been kept. Promises that include providing health care, education, and public safety.
What we figured out through our work in Rosebud is it's not a question of who has been exposed to violence as a child. It's a question of who has not been exposed to violence as a child. So you can't look at the justice portion of it or look at kids who are quote unquote in trouble and say, well, what's this kid doing here? Come on, this kid messed up. No, it's not that simple. It goes back to, I believe, where that child has come from and everything that's happened in between.
With too few police officers and a broken justice system, children often do not know where to turn.
And whenever when they would get drunk, I would send my dad to jail, and I would have problems with his side of the family, with his aunt or his sisters and brothers, and they would get mad at me for putting him in jail. So I had to put up all of that. And then plus at school, teachers would get mad at me and tell me to go bed early and to come to class on time and everything like that. So I was at one point, I was getting bullied at school. I was putting up with my parents when they were drunk. I thought I didn't want to be here in this life no more, so I thought killing myself would be a better and easier way.
My mother always said, and my grandmother as well, would always say, which means you talk to them respectfully. You're going to find out a lot of things about them, okay?
On the Rosebud Reservation, Pat Badhand is trying to rehabilitate troubled Indian teenagers by helping them learn more about their identity.
It's believed that this is the braid of the hair of an elder. So it's kind of believed that the more you use it, the more you get out of it. So the more the elder shares stories with you. A lot of the kids that we have here, 17-year-olds, first-time offenders, they come in here and what is it that they do the first 20, maybe almost 24 hours, maybe first 6 hours, 8 hours, is they cry, Sometimes maybe these kids don't feel that they're put here and nobody's gonna listen to them. I mean, they go to court puts a continued detention order on them. They don't understand the system. So you gotta go in and sit down and, kind of break that ice.
But Badhand and his colleagues will soon lose part of their staff to run their programs because some of their grants have ended. A familiar story in Indian country.
Fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of the funding for different services here on the reservation comes from different grants. Obviously, those grants have an end date, and so it's not something that carries on indefinitely. I think the challenge to the tribe and tribal workers is to figure out how to keep these programs sustainable once we do acquire those funds.
Shauna hopes to graduate high school next year, leave the reservation, and join the Army.
After I get the military, then I kind of want to come back to the res and help out.
But for now, she is still living on Pine Ridge. For the past year, she has chosen to stay with a friend's family, where she feels the safest. She still isn't getting all the help she needs to heal from the violence and alcoholism she was exposed to in her past.
Sometimes I just feel like I'm alone.
Catherine, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you about your research project. First, I wanted to clarify for the audience the title of the study, because it's pretty long. So the title is The Relationship of Adverse Childhood Experiences to PTSD, Depression, Polydrug Use, and Suicide Attempt in Reservation-Based Native American Adolescents and young adults. First, could you talk to us about the purpose of this study?
Of course. So the purpose of this study was to examine the relationship between the number of types of exposures to adverse childhood experiences, risk behaviors, and mental health outcomes among the sample of reservation-based Native American adolescents and young adults.
Okay. And if you could you define what an adverse childhood experience is?
Yeah, so those are things like emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, physical or emotional neglect, or witness to intimate partner violence.
Okay. And could you tell us what the results or the data showed you? When you guys
Yeah, we found that, we found that abuse and neglect and witnessing violence against one's mother was strongly linked to depression symptoms, polydrug use, PTSD symptoms, and suicide attempt among this sample.
Okay. Next up, we have Kendra Sherburne, who's going to talk about interventions in this population. And now we're speaking to Kendra, a clinical nurse researcher.
Yeah, hi, thank you for having me.
Welcome. So, can you talk to us a little bit about the specific nursing interventions that we can do to help this population?
Yeah, so in our study, we found that early identification of the adverse childhood experiences is going to be the most important thing that we can do. So, when a child comes in to see their PCP, we're going to screen them for some childhood abuse and other things. But this is also a great opportunity to kind of start screening the parents for things such as depression and substance use and alcohol use disorder, and catch those things early. Another intervention that nurses can do is just becoming culturally competent in this population and knowing some of their historical trauma and discrimination that they have faced. As nurses, we just need to continue to educate ourselves because we're at the forefront of the change of this, so I think that's really important.
Great, that's a great point, Kendra.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you'd like to learn more about this organization, you can visit the National Institutes of Health Clinical Center online, and we will link to that website. Thank you very much. Have a great day.